The sun was setting over Ouagadougou, but the sky wasn't orange. It was red. Red like the dust that had settled on the bodies of soldiers. Red like the silent rage of a man who had just been betrayed. Underscore, a convoy of 47 military trucks was discovered, just beyond the outskirts of Fada Ngurma, buried in plain sight, behind what appeared to be an abandoned cocoa warehouse. The local shepherd who made the call thought he had found rusted farming equipment. He had no idea he had stumbled upon a secret, one so large it could collapse a government. Why were 47 weaponized? Trucks hidden in a country already flooded with foreign contractors and proxy armies. The trucks bore no flags, no insignia, no markings, just crates, sealed, stamped in French Cyrillic, and, oddly, a barcode from Dubai. The military cordoned off the site immediately. President Ibrahim Traoré arrived within the hour. He didn't speak, he simply stared. Then he pointed at one of the crates and said only, "Open it and record everything." The soldiers obeyed. Inside RPGs, American-made assault rifles, encrypted communication devices, Israeli-grade surveillance drones, and a file. A file marked ***, Operation Vulture. Burkina Faso had long known it was a pawn in a bigger game. But this was evidence of a war that wasn't just being fought on its land, it was being controlled from the outside. Who benefits from keeping Africa in chaos? And who dares write the script for a war they never bleed in? Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood with his intelligence chief, Mamadou Kony. The file from the crate was spread across a dimly lit table, pages stamped with Western contractor logos, satellite maps, name lists. One name appeared 5 times. Elias Roth, Swiss national, dual citizenship with France, officially CEO of Tetris Global Logistics, unofficially arms dealer, intelligence broker, former UNATO asset. Traoré clenched his jaw. He recognized the name. Roth had visited Burkina Faso twice in the last year under the guise of humanitarian aid expansion. But humanitarian trucks don't carry American-made weapons. How many of our smiles were shaken hands with devils? We are committed to peace in Africa, infrastructure, sustainability, growth. Yet his signature appeared on 3 shipping manifests dated only 2 weeks prior. Same departure port, Odessa, Ukraine. Same shipping corridor through Turkey, rerouted. In Djibouti, same destination, Fada Ngurma, Burkina Faso. Traoré's intelligence teams cross-referenced maritime logs. The ship had used an obscure registration code linked to an oil company based in the UAE. The dots began connecting, but they led far beyond Burkina Faso. What if this wasn't about us at all? What if Burkina Faso was the laboratory, and we were the test subjects? An encrypted USB stick is found inside one of the drone crates. Label, Mikado Part 2, decrypted by Traoré's cyber task force. Inside, audio recordings. One voice unmistakable, Elias Roth. Another, a British accented official. The trucks need to be in place by the 14th. If Traoré doesn't bend, we activate Phase 2. Traoré played that recording 5 times. Then slowly, he whispered, "They're planning to kill me." Phase 2, destabilization plan coordinated. Village unrest, targeted tribal divisions, deployment of disguised mercenaries, media disinformation, campaigns blaming local government for foreign-caused chaos. If this is just Phase 2, what? Did Phase 1 already cost us? In a hidden room beneath the palace, the top brass met. No press, no advisors. Only loyalty. Traoré placed the red folder on the table, the same one recovered from the crates. Across the cover, a gold-embossed triangle symbol with the Latin words Veritas non licet omnibus. Truth is not permitted to all. A secret society, a rogue NATO cell, a private intelligence cabal. No one knew for sure, but one thing was certain. They never expected him to find the trucks, and now they wouldn't stop until he was gone. Outside the palace, in the wet, dark streets of Ouagadougou, a motorbike screamed through the alleys. On the rider's back, a bag. Inside that bag, a second USB drive, and on that drive, the names of 12 men. Men who had shaken Traoré's hand. Men now marked for what they truly were. 12 names and 1 betrayal. The motorbike didn't stop at checkpoints, didn't signal turns, didn't slow for traffic. It flew like a shadow through the city's nervous pulses, Narrow corridors between old colonial buildings passed. Street vendors who packed up early that night, sensing something in the air, at 2:31 a.m. The rider reached a small, windowless building behind a closed-down internet cafe. He dismounted and handed the bag containing the second USB drive to a man known only as Kaba. Kaba wasn't military. He wasn't police. He wasn't even from Burkina Faso. He was Traoré Skos, a man whose name had been erased by 5 governments but whose loyalty remained. How do you fight a war where your enemies wear suits and speak in human rights conferences? Traoré and his inner circle gathered around the screen. The new USB was decrypted. What it contained would redraw the lines of trust across the continent. Blackveil, Priority 1 the contents, a spreadsheet of payments from a Geneva-based bank, flight logs from Brussels to Ouagadougou, dinner reservations at Le Pearl Noir restaurant, and finally, 12 names, 12 men, all currently serving in either high military, economic, or communications positions in West African nations. 3 of them were Burkinabe, 1 was sitting in Traoré's cabinet, his name General Henry Douemba, respected, decorated, trusted. He had stood beside Traoré during the early days of the transition. He had spoken of Pan-African unity. He had sworn loyalty in front of the flag, and now he was listed as Node Alpha in the Blackveil document. What breaks a man more, the weight of betrayal, or the shame of believing too much in someone? Traoré sat alone with the folder. He read Douemba's name again and again, hoping it would fade. But it did, and single quotes, the folder contained evidence that Douemba had met twice with Rothwans and Lhomme, and once, during a security summit in Paris, payment trails showed $1.3 million. Transferred to a foreign bank account just 3 weeks before the weapon trucks were discovered, encrypted messages from Douemba read, "Phase 2 begins after the northern border is exposed. President's trust is firm. He suspects nothing." Traoré closed his eyes. He did suspect nothing, and that almost cost them everything. The next morning, without alerting the public, Traoré summoned Douemba to a closed-door meeting. The palace was silent. No aides, no guards, just 2 men, Traoré. Placed the USB on the table, Douemba said nothing. His face unreadable. Traoré spoke first. "I considered you my brother." Silence. "Is it true?" More silence. Then, finally, Douemba whispered, "You don't know what you're fighting." Traoré leaned forward. "Then tell me, before I decide what I'm becoming." Douemba began to talk. His words came slow, like peeling rust from an old machine. Spoke of meetings in Geneva, of men who never gave their names but always brought offers. He said they showed him photographs of his children, of his sister's home in Abidjan. They knew where everyone was. "I thought I was protecting them," he said, "but the minute I agreed, I knew I had sold my country." When you're cornered by giants, do you bow to survive, or do you risk your bloodline for honor? Douemba was quietly removed from his post. No public charges, no execution. Only exiled. Traoré believed in justice. But justice, he knew, was sometimes a shadow that couldn't move in daylight. What mattered now was what the 12 names meant. They weren't acting alone. They were connected by something else, a deeper operation, something more ancient, more intricate, something called the Red Sigil. At the bottom of the document, drawn in black ink, a 7-pointed star inside a circle with a single word beneath, sigillum, Latin for seal, and beneath that, a date, July 17, 2025. What was planned for that day, and why was Burkina Faso only the beginning? Somewhere across the border, in Mali, another truck convoy was already moving, but these trucks weren't hidden. They were being escorted by men wearing UN insignias. But the crates? Same markings, same code, same barcode from Dubai. If the system is global, how do you fight it locally? And if the enemies wear peace as a mask, who will unmask them before it's too late? They weren't hiding anymore. The trucks rolled through the dusty border roads near Gao, escorted by uniformed men bearing UN patches, helmets strapped tight, rifles gleaming in the sun. But inside those trucks weren't humanitarian supplies, no food, no medicine. Underscore same barcodes, same weapons, same darkness inside crates marked with stickers from 3 continents. And on the manifest, civil security relief, priority diplomatic clearance, What happens when the wolves wear the uniform of shepherds? Traoré, now fully aware of the scope, stood before a map of West Africa. Red markers had spread like a rash Benin, Togo, Mali, Niger, each marker tied to a manifest, a delivery, a name. Beside him stood three people: Kaba, the ghost operative; Dr. Awa Diarra, a geopolitical analyst and former UN consultant; Colonel Isaka Bure, a retired intelligence legend pulled out of seclusion. Dr. Diarra pointed to the manifest's diplomatic clearance. They're using shadow embassies, shell missions that exist only on paper, like embassies of nations that never sent an ambassador, Colonel Bure added. They're laundering weapons through legitimacy. The Red Sigil isn't a terrorist network, it's a parallel government. When corruption becomes the institution, where does truth hide? A digital briefing from an intercepted laptop, slide after slide, of complex color-coded structures, think tanks, philanthropic initiatives, tech NGOs, climate conferences, all fronts. Underneath, the same names reappeared: Elias Roth, Henry Doumbia, now exiled Ambassador Jean Fournier, France General Mukasa, Uganda, Director Claire Mendel, World Security Forum, every organization, feeding into the same 7-point star. The Red Sigil wasn't just hiding behind governments, it was the governments in a remote village near Timbuktu. A drone hovered silently above a camp of displaced families. Children huddled under tarps. Mothers stirred fires with haunted eyes. A man in a blue helmet stepped from one of the UN trucks. But he wasn't UN. He was mercenary, trained in Estonia, contracted from a Cyprus-based military firm with ties to 5 African mining licenses. He issued no aid. He scanned the village, took photos, and made a call. Zone Alpha cleared. Send the bulldozers. Traoré couldn't sleep. He stood by the window, watching lightning split the sky. His country was a chessboard, and someone had moved first. He turned to Kaba. I want to speak to the African Union, not the diplomats, the soldiers, the ones who've bled. Within 48 hours, a meeting was arranged in Kigali, Rwanda. The location was symbolic, a city once crippled by genocide, now rebuilt from ashes. There, in a soundproof chamber beneath the Kigali Convention Center, 6 heads of defense from 6 nations met without press. What if the real Africa has been quiet, not because it is weak, but because it has been watching? Traoré laid out the files. The BARCODES, the photos, the dates. He didn't shout, he didn't plead. He said only, if we don't stop this now, we won't have a continent left to argue over. General Okoye of Nigeria was the first to speak. This isn't about one country, it's a doctrine. Someone is scripting collapse. Then, from the back of the room, an elderly officer named Commander Tamba from Sierra Leone pulled a weathered book from his coat. On the leather cover, the Red Sigil, hand-etched. I saw this symbol once before, 1999. During the Diamond Wars, they weren't after minerals, they were after data. African data, habits, borders, tribal tension, fear cycles. They don't just fund the wars, they study them. What if Africa has been a simulation, a test run for something worse? July 17th was 3 days away. The date marked on the sigil documents, a decoded email outlined the plan. Simultaneous village riots. An assassination attempt in Niger, fake terror video pinned on Traoré News. Cycle manipulation via international newsrooms, but worst of all, a new convoy. Not 47 trucks, but 93. Double the payload, double the reach. This time, headed not just for Burkina Faso, but Senegal, Ghana, Cameroon. Traoré lit a candle in his office. He placed the Red Sigil folder before him. He looked into the flame and whispered, "You've hidden behind countries, behind NGOs, behind peace now. I see you, and I will drag you into the sun." But just as he said that, Kaba burst into the room. He was pale in his hand, a live feed from a border checkpoint in the south. And on that feed, a convoy of 12 white ambulances. But none bore a red cross, only a symbol, a 7-pointed star. And inside, one of those ambulances, a bombed up Burkina, will not kneel. 12 ambulances moved like ghosts down the southern highway. No sirens, no escorts, no red crosses. Only one mark, the 7-pointed sigil. Inside ambulance 4 was not a patient. It was a tactical-grade explosive device, laced with military-grade ball bearings designed for maximum crowd damage. Their destination, Ouagadougou General Hospital, the largest trauma center in the nation. What do you do when they weaponize your mercy? Kaba's voice cracked through the silence. They're 9 kilometers from the capital. Traoré didn't blink. He turned to Colonel Barret. Intercept. Too risky. Public road. Dr. Diarra whispered, if they blow up at the hospital, the media will crucify us. They'll say it was us, retaliating against our own. Traoré clenched his fists. They had planned the narrative before the act. Can you defeat an enemy who writes the headlines before pulling the trigger? From the darkness emerged a small, unmarked aircraft. It had no call sign, no country of origin. Inside sat a man with a thick folder labeled Sigil Council Action Plan 2045. He smiled. Let them try. This isn't Burkina Faso's story anymore. This is the continent's redesign. He turned on a satellite uplink and gave a single order. Release the broadcast. Screens flickered across West Africa. Fake footage showed a militant group claiming responsibility for the convoy. The banner below read, Burkina regime, arms child soldiers, plans hospital attack to gain sympathy. The footage was pre-recorded. Voices dubbed, it was war by perception. If they can convince the world you're the villain, does the truth even matter anymore? Traoré gave a final command, engage Operation Eclipse. No more silence. Traoré had quietly activated an elite Pan-African digital counterintelligence unit, codenamed Eclipse. It was composed of hackers, activists, rogue whistleblowers, and their mission, to hack, intercept, and reveal truth in real-time. At 2:19 a.m., they struck. All major channels across Africa were overridden with a live feed. A video began Traoré standing without guards, holding the red sigil folder in hand. He didn't speak first. Instead, he held up one of the bloodied weapons from truck #34. Then he said, this is what they wanted to give our children. Not peace, not progress. Explosions in our hospitals. Lies in our headlines. If I die for saying this, let it be known. Africa is not for sale. Panic. A dozen foreign operatives yelled into phones, kill the feed. How the hell did they breach the satellites? But it was too late. The footage had reached Johannesburg, Lagos, Accra, Kigali. Even Paris, even Washington. Burkina's single quotes is elite Eagle unit was waiting. They stopped the ambulances, using drone-guided jammers to disable ignition remotely. Snipers stood in silence. No civilians were hurt. The bomb in Ambulance 4 was disarmed. Inside the driver's pocket, a memo signed by Claire Mendel, World Security Forum. When institutions fund terror, can you still call them humanitarian? Mass protests erupted, not against Traoré, against foreign embassies, against Shell. NGOs, against puppet governments. Young people waved Pan-African flags. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with students. The red sigil, once hidden, now burned on banners but in flames. We see you now. A motion was submitted by 12 African nations, Independent Tribunal for Foreign Political Interference in Africa. It was ignored, but it was recorded. What happens when the world pretends not to hear justice calling? Traoré stood alone in his office again. The city was quiet. The trucks had stopped. For now, on his desk was a new document. Sagalum. Contingency B Latin America deployment. They were moving, shifting their gaze. Trying again. Elsewhere, Traoré whispered, let them run. They'll find us waiting. The flame of his candle flickered, and from the shadows behind him, Kaba stepped forward and said, it's not over. Traoré nodded. Then we keep going, one light at a time. The war has changed. It's no longer fought in trenches, but in boardrooms, in headlines, in schools and hospitals. Africa is awake now, and she remembers. *, the end.